Introduction: change can be easy. Tiny is mighty, at least when it comes to change. Over the last 20 years, I've found that most everyone wants to make some kind of change. Eat healthier, lose weight, exercise more, reduce stress, get better sleep. We want to be better parents and partners. We want to be more productive and creative. But the alarming levels of obesity, sleeplessness, and stress reported by the media and seen in my Stanford Labs research tell me there is a painful gap between what people want and what they actually do. The disconnect between want and do has been blamed on a lot of things, but people blame it on themselves for the most part. They internalize the cultural message of "it's your fault. You should exercise more, but you aren't doing it. Shame on you." I am here to say, it isn't your fault, and creating positive change isn't as hard as you think. For too many years, myths, misconceptions, and well-meaning but unscientific advice have set you up to fail. If you've attempted change in the past and haven't seen results, you may have concluded that change is hard or that you can't succeed because you lack motivation. Neither is accurate. The problem is with the approach itself, not with you. Think of it this way: if you tried putting together a chest of drawers with faulty instructions and parts missing, you would feel frustrated, but you probably wouldn't blame yourself for this, would you? You would blame the manufacturer instead. When it comes to failed attempts at change, we almost never blame the manufacturer. We blame ourselves. When our results fall short of our expectations, the inner critic finds an opening and steps on stage. Many of us believe that if we fail to be more productive, lose weight, or exercise regularly, then something must be wrong with us. If only we were better people, we wouldn't have failed. If only we had followed that program to the letter or kept those promises to ourselves, we would have succeeded. We just need to get our act together and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and do better. Right? Nope. Sorry, not right. We are not the problem. Our approach to change is. It's a design flaw, not a personal flaw. Building habits and creating positive change can be easy if you have the right approach. A system based on how human psychology really works. A process that makes change easier. Tools that don't rely on guesswork or faulty principles. Popular thinking about habit formation and change feeds into our impulse to set unrealistic expectations. We know habits matter, we just need more good habits and fewer bad ones. But here we are, still struggling to change, still thinking it's our fault. All my research and hands-on experience tell me that this is exactly the wrong mindset. In order to design successful habits and change your behaviors, you should do 3 things. Plus, stop judging yourself. Plus, take your aspirations and break them down into tiny behaviors. Plus, embrace mistakes as discoveries and use them to move forward. This may not feel intuitive. I know it doesn't come naturally to everyone. Self-criticism is its own kind of habit. For some people, blaming yourself is just where your brain goes. It's like a sled in the snow, slipping into a well-worn path down the hill. If you follow the tiny habits process, you'll start taking a different route. Snow will quickly start covering those self-doubting grooves. The new path will soon be the default path. This happens quickly, because with tiny habits you change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad. The process doesn't require you to rely on willpower, or set up accountability measures, or promise yourself rewards. There is no magic number of days you have to do something. Those approaches aren't based on the way habits really work, and as a result, they aren't reliable methods for change, and they often make us feel bad. This book says goodbye to all that change angst and, even more important, shows you how to easily and joyfully bridge the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. Tiny habits will be your guide to disrupting the old approach and replacing it with an entirely new framework for change. The system I'll share with you is not guesswork. I've road-tested the process with more than 40,000 people during years of research and refinement. By coaching all these people personally and gathering data week by week, I know that the tiny habits method works. It replaces misunderstandings with proven principles, and it trades prescriptions for process. You'll take what the co-founder of Instagram, my former student, learned about human behavior to design a breakthrough app, and you'll use the same methods to create breakthrough changes in your own life and the lives of others. And best of all, you get to have fun. Once you remove any hint of judgment, your behavior becomes a science experiment. A sense of exploration and discovery is a prerequisite to success, not just an added bonus. Behavior design. Welcome to behavior design. This is my comprehensive system for thinking clearly about human behavior and for designing simple ways to transform your life. My early work in behavior design helped innovators create products that millions of people use every day to get fit, save money, drive efficiently, and more. After seeing the power of these methods to successfully design business solutions, I shifted my focus to the personal. How do we change our own behavior? I got focused on changes that people want to make for themselves. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw plenty that could be improved on. I decided to do what every gung-ho scientist does at one time or another. I experimented on myself. I tinkered with the behaviors I wanted to incorporate into my life. I did silly things that turned out to be wildly successful, like doing 2 push-ups after every time I pee. I did seemingly rational things that totally failed, like trying to eat an orange every day at lunch. Whenever something didn't work, I went back to my models and analyzed what happened. I started seeing patterns. I followed hunches. I pivoted. I iterated endlessly. Even though I was a behavior scientist, I had to learn how to create habits in my own life. It wasn't obvious or natural for me, it was a deliberate process. But with practice I turned a weakness into a strength, and 6 months later, I had significantly changed my life. I lost 20 pounds and felt healthier and stronger. I was working more productively and more effectively than ever before. I started eating eggs and spinach for breakfast and cauliflower with mustard as an afternoon snack. And I weeded out foods that weren't helping me. I started each day with an uplifting series of habits, and I designed my life and my environment to get better sleep. As I figured this out, with twists and turns along the way, I realized that my ability to change was increasing and my momentum was building. As I accumulated dozens of new habits, mostly tiny ones, they combined to create a transformation. Sustaining all this did not feel hard. Pursuing change in this way felt natural and oddly fun. The results delighted me, and I started teaching my methods to others in 2011. My research showed this approach worked for other people, too, and it changed their lives. To my surprise and excitement, what started as a whimsical self-exploration in the behavior design universe became a proven method called tiny habits. The quickest, easiest vehicle for personal transformation. Before I go on, let me set the record straight. Information alone does not reliably change behavior. This is a common mistake people make, even well-meaning professionals. The assumption is this: if we give people the right information, it will change their attitudes, which in turn will change their behaviors. I call this the information action fallacy. Many products and programs, and well-meaning professionals, set out to educate people as a way to change them. At professional conferences they say stuff like, if people just knew the facts, they would change. As you look at your own experiences, you'll see that information alone did not transform your life. And that's certainly not your fault. In my research on habit formation, dating back to 2009, I've found that there are only 3 things we can do that will create lasting change: have an epiphany, change our environment, or change our habits in tiny ways. Creating a true epiphany for ourselves is difficult and probably impossible. We should rule out that option unless we have magical powers. But here's the good news: the other 2 options can lead to lasting change if we follow the right program. And tiny habits gives us a new way to tap the power of environment and baby steps. Creating positive habits is the place to start. And creating tiny positive habits is the path to developing much bigger ones. Once you know how tiny habits works and why it works, you can make big one-time changes. You can disrupt unwanted habits. You can work up to bucket list behaviors like running a marathon. I'll help guide you through each of the different behavior change scenarios that you might encounter. The essence of tiny habits is this: take a behavior you want, make it tiny, find where it fits naturally in your life, and nurture its growth. If you want to create long-term change, it's best to start small. Here's why. Tiny is fast. Time. There's never enough of it, and we always want more of it. We eat drippy hamburgers in our cars and take conference calls while we're at the beach with our kids because we feel so pressed for time. This pressure leads to a scarcity mindset. We believe that there will never be enough time. So we say no to changes because we feel like we don't have the hours to cultivate new positive habits. 30 minutes of exercise a day, cooking a healthy dinner every night, writing daily in a gratitude journal. Forget it. Who has the time? You could scold yourself down the path of change, or you could make your life a lot easier. You could start tiny. With the tiny habits method, you focus on small actions that you can do in less than 30 seconds. You will quickly wire in new habits, and then they will grow naturally. Starting tiny means you can begin creating a big change without worrying about the time involved. With tiny habits, I advise people to start with 3 very small behaviors or even just 1. The more stressed you are and the less time you have, the more appropriate this method is for you. No matter how much you want to cultivate a healthy habit, you won't be able to do it reliably if you start big. When you go big, the new habit probably won't stick. In many people's lives, tiny isn't just the best option. It might be the only option. Tiny can start now. Tiny allows you to get real with yourself and your life. Tiny allows you to start right now. It meets you where you are, whether your life is in a desperate spiral or you are stressed out but otherwise fortunate. We all have our own life circumstances to contend with, ways of thinking that aren't ideal, and quirks of psychology that hold us back. We could feel bummed and ashamed about it, or we could use the tiny habits method to hack the system. I won't prescribe exact habits in this book. I'm sharing a method for wiring in any habit you want. You pick the habits, but right here, right now, I'm making an exception. I invite you to start practicing a new habit first thing each and every morning. It's simple. and it takes about 3 seconds. I call it the Maui habit. After you put your feet on the floor in the morning, immediately say this phrase. It's going to be a great day. As you say these 7 words, try to feel optimistic and positive. The recipe in Tiny Habits format looks like this. Over the years, I've helped thousands of people bring the Maui habit into their lives, and the results have been excellent. It's certainly been effective in my own life. With the Maui habit, you can start immediately, and almost effortlessly, toward a better future. Here are a few variations on this habit to consider. Some people say a slightly different phrase each morning, such as "today is going to be awesome." If that phrase or some variation works better for you, adjust as needed. A few people have changed the timing. Some say this phrase when they look in the mirror in the morning. I'm quite sure that wouldn't work for me. I avoid looking in the mirror first thing. Yikes. But if this spot in your routine works best for you, then go for it. I suggest you start with the classic version as written on the recipe card, then modify it if needed. When I do the Maui habit each morning, I pause for 2 or 3 seconds after I say the phrase. I'm still waking up at that point, and I want the idea to sink in. If you do the Maui habit and feel that it won't be a great day, I advise you to still say this phrase. I say it even on mornings when I feel exhausted or overwhelmed or anxious about the day ahead. In that moment, sitting on the edge of my bed, I try to feel optimistic. But if this feels phony, then I adjust the phrase and my intonation as I say, "It's going to be a great day." Somehow, I find this oddly helpful even on my worst days. When I'm worried about the day ahead, this statement, even when I say it with a question in my voice, seems to open the door just a crack to actually having a good day. And that's exactly what happens most days. Think of the Maui habit as a simple practice you do each morning in about 3 seconds. This will show you how easy it is to get started, and it will help you learn the single most important skill in behavior change: feeling successful. Tiny is safe. A friend of mine has an 18-month-old baby named Willa who is new to the whole walking thing. The other day Willa was running around our driveway chasing my dog, Millie, and I watched Willa trip and fall about a half dozen times. Scaling curbs and negotiating sewer grates is tricky business for a toddler. But she kept popping right back up. Willa would squawk a little bit here and there, but she wasn't actually getting hurt. So why not keep going? If I were the one learning to walk and crashing down on hard pavement, I'd be pretty banged up. At my height, I'm more than 6 feet tall. Falling would hurt more. The same concept applies to starting a new behavior or habit. If you have never done yoga before, there are multiple places to start, but they all have different levels of risk. You could decide to do one sun salutation or buy a month of unlimited classes at your local studio or hop on a plane for a week-long retreat in India. The investment of time and money and expectation is wildly different with each option. Very few people would take off to India without having stepped foot on a yoga mat. Why? Something in our lizard brains inherently understands how high these stakes would be. Which is why it can feel hard to start something new if it is too big. If I can barely surf the gentle waves at Cove Park in Maui, I wouldn't dare surf the massive swells at Jaws on the other side of Maui. I would likely get hurt, and I might lose all my confidence in surfing, even on small waves. Why would I do that to myself? It doesn't sound fun. Better stick to Cove Park. With Tiny Habits, risk doesn't have to factor into the equation. Tiny can also be undercover. You can start to change without making a big scene. No one will sabotage you. This reduces the pressure on you. Because these behaviors are so small and the program so flexible, emotional risk is eliminated. There is no real failure in Tiny Habits. There are little stumbles, but if you get up again, that's not failure. That's a habit in the making. Tiny can grow big. Over the last 20 years, I've found that the only consistent, sustainable way to grow big is to start small. Amy, a former student of mine, was a stay-at-home mom who was trying to get an educational media company off the ground. The idea of being her own boss and doing something she loved was thrilling. But there was so much to think about: hiring new employees, shopping around for office space, deciphering tax codes. She would procrastinate the important stuff, like legal agreements, and chose to work on tasks she loved, like designing her logo. But she was running out of time to build her business plan, and the thought of the venture falling apart in her hands paralyzed her. Amy wanted to get her business off the ground, and she kept making promises to herself that she'd tackle the big stuff soon, but months after the talking, she still hadn't done any walking. The change myth was holding Amy back, the pervasive idea that you've got to go big or go home. We live in an aspiration-driven culture that is rooted in instant gratification. We find it difficult to enact or even accept incremental progress, which is exactly what you need to cultivate meaningful long-term change. People get frustrated and demoralized when things don't happen quickly. It's natural, it's normal, but it's another way we're set up to fail. When Amy found the Tiny Habits method, she discovered that the best way to eat a monstrous whale, as little Melinda Me did in Shel Silverstein's poem, was to take one bite at a time. Amy ditched go big or go home and decided to go tiny. Every morning after dropping her daughter off at kindergarten, she pulled over on the side of the road and wrote one to-do on a sticky note. Just one. Each one was something she could accomplish right away. Send out one sales email, schedule a project meeting, draft a quick introduction to a patient guide. The simple act of focusing her energy on writing down one task led to a chain reaction that propelled her entire day and eventually led to the successful launch of her company. The feeling of success stuck with her as she drove home with her post-it fluttering on the dashboard. And when she pulled into her driveway and grabbed the bright pink sticky note, she took it inside to achieve a quick success. One tiny action, one small bite, might feel insignificant at first, but it allows you to gain the momentum you need to ramp up to bigger challenges and faster progress. The next thing you know, you've eaten the whole whale. Tiny doesn't rely on motivation or willpower. When it comes to chatter about behavior change, a lot of what you hear will mislead you. Be careful, even highly cited academic theories often fail to transform people's lives in the real world. As you know, motivation and willpower get a lot of airtime. People are always looking for ways to ramp them up and sustain them over time. The problem is that both motivation and willpower are shapeshifters by nature, which makes them unreliable. Case in point, Junie from Chicago, who had more motivation to make a change than anyone I've met. Her addiction to sugar was threatening her health, her family, and her job. An early morning radio show host with an insanely busy schedule, Junie was always on the move. Instead of sitting down for lunch, she'd down a caramel macchiato from Starbucks. The pace of life on the air was intense, and she thought she needed the sugar to keep up. Junie believed that having that type of energy required stimulants, and ice cream was Junie's drug of choice. Bubblegum and cookie dough. To be exact, she'd crash hard when she got home, her 2 children playing video games as she lay zonked out on the couch. A few years before I met Junie, her mother died from diabetes. It should have been a wake-up call, all the motivation Junie would ever need. But she tried to numb the pain with more and more bubblegum ice cream. Junie gained 15 pounds that summer. Soon after, both of her sisters were diagnosed with diabetes. Then her grandmother, who also had diabetes, died. The disease was picking off members of her family one by one. After years of writing off her sugar addiction as a sweet tooth, Junie recognized that it was dangerous. She had lost control. At this point, her motivation spiked. She tried going cold turkey a number of times, which worked, for about a day, maybe 2. Then she'd get down on herself, feel bad, resume the sugar fist, and watch the scale creep up. Junie thought that conquering sugar was a matter of willpower, that she wasn't strong enough to say no. This was frustrating and confusing for her because she always identified herself as someone who was incredibly strong-willed and determined. You don't make it to a major market radio show any other way, but the idea that stopping a habit is a matter of willpower couldn't have been further from the truth. Soon after Junie joined one of my behavior design boot camps for business reasons, she looked closely at her personal life and realized that her sugar addiction was a design issue, not a character flaw. The fact that her motivation would seesaw wasn't her fault. It wasn't a moral failing. Once Junie understood a key maxim of behavior design, simplicity changes behavior. She refocused her personal efforts to create a constellation of habits, tiny in size but big on impact, that helped her to kick her sugar habit for good. She redesigned her environment and swapped out all her go-to sugary snacks with snacks containing less sugar that she still liked to eat, not unappealing substitutes like celery sticks and carrots. She cultivated a series of exercise and eating habits that crowded out and undermined her desire for sugar. Junie also discovered that her unresolved grief was prompting many of her sugar binging behaviors, so she created a few more habits, always starting tiny, to help her process her feelings in a more positive way. When a wave of grief welled up and threatened to overtake her, Junie took that as a prompt to journal or reach out to a friend instead of reaching for the nearest candy bar. Perhaps most important of all, Junie was able to approach every new habit with a mindset of openness and self-compassion. There were moments when she fell off the wagon with sugar, but she didn't look at this as a failure of character but as a design insight she could use to improve what she did in the future. Keeping changes small and expectations low is how you design around fair weather friends like motivation and willpower. When something is tiny, it's easy to do, which means you don't need to rely on the unreliable nature of motivation. Tiny is transformative. With the tiny habits method, you celebrate successes no matter how small they are. This is how we take advantage of our neurochemistry and quickly turn deliberate actions into automatic habits. Feeling successful helps us wire in new habits, and it motivates us to do more. I see these results week after week in my Tiny Habits data. But there's more. With Tiny Habits, you also learn how to feel good in your life. The ability to pat yourself on the back instead of beat yourself up grows solid, life-changing roots. Linda planted her first Tiny Habit seed in the middle of what I would call a hurricane-strength life storm. About 10 years ago, before she became a Tiny Habits coach, things fell apart tragically. In the course of only a few years, her son died of a drug overdose, her daughter was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and the family business was circling the drain. In the middle of this already overwhelming time in her life, Linda found out that her husband had been living with undiagnosed early-onset Alzheimer's disease. As she began to take the reins of their business, she discovered another consequence of his illness: a decline in judgment. Bad business decisions coupled with a recession meant that they would be headed to bankruptcy court within months. They lost all their savings, their house, and the horse ranch that had been Linda's dream. This was a series of catastrophes that few of us will ever face, and there wasn't time for despair or shock. Linda had kids to raise and a business to save from bankruptcy. She was grief-stricken with no time to grieve, and she quickly fell into a depression. How to start digging out of such a hole? When Linda first started Tiny Habits, she told me that every morning she would find herself on the edge of her bed praying for strength. She wanted to feel better. She wanted to get out of bed. She wanted to be there for her kids. But she had trouble even putting her feet on the ground in the morning. When Tiny Habits came into her life, she could focus on only one thing: the morning challenge. She wanted to start the day off in hope, not despair. After experimenting with several habits, she finally found one, the Maui habit, that she says literally saved my life. It turned out that this tiny tweak, this pivotal behavior, was a fulcrum. Every morning, she woke up, put her feet on the floor, and said 7 words out loud: "It's going to be a great day." Things soon started to feel different, very different. For Linda, tiny was the only option. She needed to start small to grow big, and she needed to feel good about something. This new habit led to others that helped her feel successful. They helped her to be more productive and get healthy and stay strong for her kids. But most important, her new habits were tiny seeds of positivity that she planted in the cracks of her life. And they grew and grew. Even as new cracks kept appearing, Linda could look around her and be reminded that she had the ability to feel successful. She was successful. The evidence was blooming around her. She just had to keep watering. 6 years later, Linda has coached thousands of people in the Tiny Habits method. She loves her work. She'll be the first to say that her life is still a struggle, but she no longer hesitates when she wakes up in the morning. She knows that tiny is transformative, so she sits up and puts her feet on the floor and says those 7 little words: "It's going to be a great day." The anatomy of Tiny Habits. 1. Anchor moment: an existing routine or an event that happens. The anchor moment reminds you to do the new tiny behavior. 2. New tiny behavior: a simple version of the new habit you want, such as flossing 1 tooth or doing 2 push-ups. You do the tiny behavior immediately after the anchor moment. 3. Instant celebration: something you do to create positive emotions, such as saying, "I did a good job." You celebrate immediately after doing the new tiny behavior. Anchor behavior celebration. Tiny starts with a key. I didn't wake up one day and decide to take the idea of baby steps to an extreme. First, I discovered how human behavior really works. It took me 10 years of researching human behavior to find the key that unlocked the mystery. But in 2007 I did. The answer is surprisingly simple. At first, it was hard to believe no one had discovered this before. But I now see that some mysteries are like riddles. When you don't know the answers, riddles seem hard to solve. But once you see the answer, the solution seems obvious. With the answer I discovered, you can decode behavior. All behavior: putting your toothbrush in a new place, unloading the dishwasher every morning before breakfast, watering the garden in the evening, doing 2 squats while your morning coffee brews, taking the trash out on Wednesday, smoking, not smoking, checking your watch for the time, checking your phone for the time, Instagramming at 3 a.m., kissing your husband when you get home from work, making the bed, not making the bed, eating chocolate, not eating chocolate, reading this book, not reading this book. That habit you have tried for years to cultivate. That habit you have tried for years to stop. Some of these behaviors are positive habits. Some are not. What I discovered is that all of these behaviors emerge from the same components. Their relationship drives our every action and reaction. They are the basic ingredients of human behavior. In this book I share my behavior design models, which will help you think clearly about behavior. I also explain my methods, which will guide you in designing habits. To see a chart of all the models and methods in this book, please go to the appendix Behavior Design, Models, Methods, and Maxims on page 277. My models and methods are supported by research in behavior science and evidence from related domains. You can find a large set of references at tinyhabits.com/references. In the chapters that follow I give you all the exercises you need to redesign your habits. If you want more, you can find worksheets and other resources at tinyhabits.com/resources. When you know how to adjust the components of human behavior, you can begin to tackle any behavior change challenge in your life, which means there is no feeling stuck, which means you can be the person you want to be. If this sounds awesome and crazy and a little overwhelming, Don't worry, I'll be right there with you, sharing what I've learned from helping thousands of people change their lives. So where do we start? With the key that unlocks the mystery, the Fogg behavior model.